Jason never thought his life would lead him here. Just a year ago, he was an ordinary human man, living in a crowded city on Earth, working late hours and trying to save every penny to keep his small life together. He never expected that one simple decision, to take a roommate and cut down his rent, would change his life in ways he couldn't even imagine. Because the roommate he found wasn't human. Her name was Lyra. She came from a distant star system that most humans couldn't even pronounce. Jason had seen aliens on the news before, but seeing one on a screen was nothing compared to meeting one in person. She was taller than him by at least half a foot, her silver-toned skin catching the light like liquid metal, smooth and flawless. Her hair shimmered like strands of pale starlight, falling gently over her shoulders, and her glowing blue eyes gave her an almost otherworldly beauty that could both unsettle and enchant a human at the same time. When she first stepped into the apartment, Jason had felt nervous, almost awkward. It wasn't every day you shook hands with someone from another planet, but Lyra was quiet, polite, and carried herself with a kind of careful grace, as though she was afraid of breaking the human world around her. Their agreement was simple. Jason paid half the rent, she covered utilities, and they respected each other's space. At least that was the plan. But life had a strange way of pulling people together. At first, their interactions were small. Passing greetings in the kitchen, a nod when one came home late. But as days turned into weeks, Jason began to notice little things about Lyra. She had a habit of sitting on the balcony at night, gazing at the stars with a look of longing in her glowing eyes. She cooked strange alien meals that filled the apartment with scents Jason couldn't describe, and sometimes she'd leave a portion aside for him, an unspoken kindness. Slowly, the walls between them began to fall. One rainy evening, when thunder shook the building, Jason found her sitting quietly in the living room, her posture tense, her hands gripping the fabric of the couch. She admitted that storms on Earth frightened her, because on her homeworld storms meant danger, violent winds, and deadly lightning. Without thinking, Jason sat beside her, not too close, but close enough. They spent the evening in silence, watching the rain together. It was the first time she truly seemed human to him, vulnerable. That night changed something between them. From then on, their conversations grew longer. Sometimes they'd stay up until 2 in the morning, Jason asking endless questions about her world, its oceans of crystal, its floating mountains, its creatures that glowed like fireflies in the dark. In return, Lyra asked about Earth, not the things she could read in books or databases, but the little things, what it felt like to ride a bike downhill, what it was like to taste ice cream on a hot day, how it felt when your mother hugged you as a child. Jason realized something then. Lyra wasn't just living far from home. She was carrying a deep loneliness inside her. No matter how confident or graceful she seemed, her eyes gave her away. Eyes that sometimes looked like she was searching for something she couldn't find. Eyes that carried the weight of someone who had lost too much. Jason didn't ask what she had left behind. He didn't push. He only offered his presence, the simple comfort of being there. And she noticed. Their friendship was strange, fragile, but real. Jason started looking forward to coming home, to see her at the table, sometimes reading, sometimes humming soft alien melodies that filled the room with a haunting beauty. He never understood the words, but he felt them in his chest. He told himself it was just a living arrangement, just 2 people, no, 2 beings, sharing space in a big, empty city. But deep down, Jason knew it was becoming more. And sometimes, when Lyra looked at him across the room, her glowing blue eyes softening, Jason felt something stir inside him, something he couldn't name, something that scared him, and yet drew him closer. He didn't know it yet, but this fragile connection, this quiet companionship, was only the beginning. Something was coming, something that would test them both, and Jason's life would never be the same again. The first sign came on a quiet evening. Jason had just returned home from work, tired and dragging his feet, when he noticed something unusual. The lights in the living room were dim, but he could hear movement inside. Lyra was pacing back and forth, her silver hair glowing faintly in the low light, her body tense like a coiled spring. "Lyra?" Jason asked carefully, dropping his bag near the door. "Are you okay?" She stopped, but didn't look at him right away. Her breathing was shallow, uneven, and Jason could see her hands trembling. For a moment, he thought she was sick, maybe catching some kind of alien illness. He took a step closer, concern washing over him, but when she turned to face him, he froze. Her eyes, normally a calm, glowing blue, were brighter now, almost burning. Her cheeks were flushed with strange color, and her skin seemed warmer than usual, glowing faintly as if her body was lit from within. Jason's chest tightened. "Lyra, what's happening to you?" She swallowed hard, her voice cracking when she spoke. "It is my season." Jason blinked. "Season?" Her gaze flickered away, full of shame, as if she hated explaining it. "My kind. Every cycle, we enter a state. Humans might call it heat." The word sounded heavy on her tongue. "It is not an illness, but it is difficult to endure." Jason's breath caught. He had heard about alien biology before. Rumors whispered online, but he never thought he would be standing face to face with it. Heat. A biological cycle meant for reproduction. And Lyra was right in the middle of it. He tried to keep his voice steady. "Does it hurt?" Her lips parted, and Jason could see the faint trembling of her body. "Yes. If resisted, it grows worse. Pain spreads through the nerves, the body burns, and the mind loses balance." She closed her eyes tightly, clutching her arms as if holding herself together. "That is why we avoid being near others during this time." Jason felt a pang in his chest. She was suffering, alone. And yet, she was here, stuck in a small apartment, far from her own people. "Lyra," Jason said softly, taking a cautious step forward. "What do you need? Can I do something?" Her eyes snapped open, glowing brighter, her voice urgent. "No! You should not be here! It is dangerous for you!" Jason hesitated. Dangerous? To him? But looking at her, her trembling form, her breath quickening, the desperate look in her eyes, he couldn't bring himself to walk away. "Dangerous how?" he asked carefully. Lyra's voice lowered, heavy with emotion. "Because my body calls for bonding. It pulls me toward the nearest partner. And humans..." She broke off, shaking her head. "Humans are not meant to answer such a call. It could harm you." Jason stood frozen, his mind racing. On one side was his fear. This was way beyond anything he'd ever faced. On the other was the raw truth staring him in the face. Lyra was hurting, alone, trembling in silence because she didn't want to endanger him. The apartment felt hotter. Jason could feel it in the air, as though the room itself was charged with invisible energy. Lyra's presence pressed against him, not just physical, but something deeper, like gravity pulling him closer. She sat down on the couch suddenly, her legs weak beneath her, clutching her knees like a frightened child. Her voice was barely a whisper. "My people would say, endure until it breaks. But here I have no one, no bondmate, no way to ease the storm inside. I fear I may not endure." Her words hit Jason like a blade. She wasn't just describing pain. She was describing loneliness. A loneliness so deep it threatened to consume her. He moved closer, kneeling a few feet away, not touching her, just letting his voice steady her. "You're not alone, Lyra. You're here with me. And I'll help you however I can." Her eyes lifted to meet his, glowing and desperate. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The silence was heavy, but it wasn't empty. Jason's heart pounded. He didn't fully understand what was happening or what the next step would be. All he knew was one thing. He couldn't turn his back. Not on her. Not when she needed him most. And as he looked into her trembling eyes, Jason felt the truth settle deep inside him. Something was changing between them. Something neither of them could control, and life would never be the same again. Jason tried to stay calm, but his heart was racing. He had never seen Lyra like this before. Her glowing skin, her trembling body, her eyes that seemed to burn with both pain and longing. The air itself felt heavier, warmer, as if her presence filled every corner of the room. He told himself to step back, to give her space, to respect the boundaries she was so afraid of crossing. But no matter how hard he tried, something deep inside refused to let him leave her alone. Lyra sat curled on the couch, her arms hugging herself tightly. Her breathing came in sharp gasps, her forehead damp with sweat. She looked fragile, almost breakable, and yet, at the same time, there was an undeniable strength in her, like a storm trapped in a body too small to contain it. Jason swallowed, his voice soft. "Lyra, you don't have to go through this by yourself." Her head snapped up, her glowing eyes locking onto his. For a second, Jason felt his breath hitch. It was like staring into a flame, dangerous but impossible to look away from. "You don't understand," she whispered, her voice trembling. "This is not just pain. It is hunger. My body calls for something it should not call from you. If I let it, if I allow it, I might lose control." Jason shook his head, moving slowly to sit on the floor near her, keeping just enough distance to respect her fear. "I don't care if I don't fully understand. I care that you're suffering, and I can't just stand here while you hurt." Lyra's hands gripped the couch cushion tightly, her nails leaving faint marks. She bit her lip, her voice breaking. "You are human. My kind believes it is impossible for your species to bond with us. If you try, it could destroy you. I don't want that. I would rather suffer than harm you." Her words should have scared him. Maybe they did, somewhere deep in his chest. But stronger than the fear was the ache he felt watching her. She had carried her loneliness like a shadow since the day she moved in. And now, when she needed someone most, she wanted to push him away, because she thought he was too fragile, too human to stand with her. Jason clenched his fists, his voice firm but gentle. "You don't get to decide that for me, Lyra. Maybe it's dangerous, maybe it's not. But what I know is this: you're not alone anymore. Not while I'm here." Her eyes widened, her glowing pupils narrowing slightly, as if she couldn't believe what she was hearing. For a long moment, the room was silent except for her shaky breaths. Then, slowly, she whispered, Why would you risk yourself for me?" Jason's chest tightened. He hadn't wanted to say it out loud, but the truth slipped past his lips anyway. "Because you matter to me." The words hung in the air between them, heavy and real. Lyra's body trembled harder, but not just from the heat consuming her. Her expression cracked, her lips parting as if she couldn't find the right words. For the first time, Jason saw tears welling in her bright eyes. Her voice was fragile when she finally spoke. "No one has ever said that to me." Jason felt a pang in his chest. How could someone so strong, so extraordinary, believe she didn't matter? He wanted to reach out, to hold her, to erase every shadow of loneliness she carried. But he held back, giving her the choice. Slowly, carefully, Lyra leaned forward, her hand trembling as it hovered in the air between them. Jason lifted his hand, too, and when their fingers touched, he felt a shock run through him. Not painful, but warm, deep, and alive. Lyra gasped softly, her eyes widening. You felt that? Jason nodded, his throat dry. Yeah, I did. Her lips trembled, her body shaking as if she were on the edge of breaking apart. Then maybe it is not impossible. Jason's heart pounded louder. Something was happening between them, something neither of their worlds believed could exist. And yet, it was there, in the touch of their hands, in the way her eyes softened as she looked at him, in the invisible pull drawing them closer together. He didn't know where this path would lead, or what dangers lay ahead. But one thing was clear. This wasn't just heat. This wasn't just biology. It was connection. And for the first time, Jason understood that their bond was real, and it was only growing stronger. Jason could not sleep that night. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, his chest heavy, his mind caught between fear and something he didn't want to name. On the other side of the thin wall, Lyra was awake too. He could hear her quiet breathing. Sharp at times, almost like muffled cries. Every sound cut into him. He wanted to get up, to go to her, to tell her she wasn't alone. But he also knew what she had said, that it was dangerous, that her body was calling for something it should not ask from a human. Jason turned on his side, closing his eyes tightly. She's my friend, my roommate. If I give in, am I helping her or taking advantage? The thought tortured him. He remembered the way she looked at him earlier, eyes glowing, body trembling, lips parted as if she was both afraid and desperate. That look had seared itself into his memory, and no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't erase it. The night grew colder, yet Jason felt hot under his blanket. His mind spun with doubt and guilt. He cared about her, more than he should. But if he crossed the line, would she ever forgive him? Would he forgive himself? Then another sound reached him, a faint whimper, followed by a soft, broken voice. Please, it hurts. Jason sat up immediately, his heart pounded. He knew he shouldn't go. He knew it was crossing a boundary. But he also knew he couldn't just lie there, listening to her suffer. He stood, his legs heavy, and walked to her door. For a long moment he just stared at it, his hand hovering over the wood. His mind screamed at him to turn back. But his heart pushed him forward. He knocked softly. Lyra? There was silence at first, only the sound of her uneven breathing. Then slowly, the door opened a crack. Lyra stood there, her body trembling, her silver skin glowing faintly in the dark. Her eyes were wet with tears, glowing brighter than ever, and her voice broke when she spoke. I can't hold it anymore. Jason's chest tightened painfully. He wanted to pull her into his arms, to shield her from everything, but he kept his hands at his sides. He didn't want to force anything. He needed her to choose. Then let me stay with you, he said softly, steadying, his voice even though his heart was racing. Not to take advantage, not to hurt you, just so you're not alone. Lyra stared at him for a long time, her lips trembling, her breathing heavy. She looked torn between fear and hope. Finally, with a small nod, she stepped back, opening the door wider. Jason entered the room slowly. It was warmer inside, almost stifling, as if her body's heat filled the air. He sat down on the edge of the bed, careful to keep space between them. Lyra wrapped her arms around herself, sitting across from him, her glowing eyes never leaving his face. You don't understand. My kind, when we bond, it is forever. It is not something we can undo. If you touch me in that way, if you accept me, I will be bound to you for life. Jason felt the weight of her words sink deep inside him. Forever. Not just one night, not just a moment of comfort, forever. And yet looking at her now, he realized he wasn't afraid of that. The idea of being bound to her didn't feel like a prison. It felt like a promise. "I don't care how long it lasts," Jason whispered, his voice firm but gentle. "If it means you don't have to suffer alone, then I'll stay." Lyra's breath caught, her glowing eyes widening. For a moment, she looked as if she might collapse from the weight of her emotions. Slowly, carefully, she reached out her hand toward him. Jason hesitated only a second before lifting his own hand. Their fingers brushed, and once again, that strange warmth spread through him, deeper this time, like their very souls were touching. Lyra gasped, tears slipping down her cheeks. You really can." Jason gave her a small, steady smile. "Then maybe I'm not as fragile as you think." The silence that followed was heavy, but it wasn't empty. It was full of something new, something powerful. Hope. For the first time, Lyra allowed herself to lean closer, resting her forehead against his. It was a gesture Jason recognized from before, one of trust, one of intimacy. And in that moment, he knew the truth. This was no longer just her fight. It was theirs. Jason had never felt a moment stretch so long. Sitting there with Lyra's forehead pressed against his, he could feel every shaky breath she took, every tremor running through her body. The warmth between them was more than physical. It was alive, pulsing, as though their hearts were speaking a language without words. He should have been afraid. Any human would be, faced with something so unknown, so impossible. But Jason wasn't. The only thing he felt was the weight of her trust, and the desperate need to keep her from breaking. Lyra pulled back slightly, her glowing eyes shimmering with tears. "Jason, if we go further, there will be no return. My people once bonded are bound forever. No one has ever done this with a human. No one knows if it can even work." Jason searched her face. He could see the fear in her, the doubt, but also something else, hope, fragile and trembling, like a candle fighting against the wind. He lifted his hand and brushed it gently against hers. "Lyra, maybe I don't know what's going to happen. Maybe it's dangerous, but I know one thing. I don't want you to face this alone. Not tonight, not ever." Her lips trembled, and her body shook harder. "You don't understand. If you let me bond with you, you become my world. You become everything. I won't be able to let you go." Jason's chest tightened, his voice steady as he whispered, "Then I'll stay. I'm not going anywhere." The tears that slipped down her silver cheeks then were unlike any Jason had ever seen. Not only because they glowed faintly in the dim light, but because they carried years of loneliness, years of silence, years of believing she would never belong. With trembling hands, Lyra reached for him. Her fingers brushed his cheek, her touch warmer than any human hand, almost burning, yet gentle. Jason closed his eyes and leaned into it. The contact sent a surge through him, not pain, but something deeper, like a current flowing between their souls. Lyra gasped softly, her whole body trembling. It's happening." Jason opened his eyes, and for the first time, he saw her not as an alien, not as a roommate, but as someone who had been waiting her entire life for this moment of connection. He took her hand in his firmly, holding it to his chest. "Then let it happen." The air around them seemed to shift, thick and heavy, filled with invisible energy. Lyra leaned forward, her forehead pressing to his again, but this time the bond was different. Jason could feel her, truly. Feel her, not just physically, but emotionally. Her pain, her longing, her loneliness, all pouring into him like waves, and in return he gave her himself, his steady presence, his quiet strength, his unspoken promise that he would not leave her. Lyra let out a soft, broken sound, almost a sob as she clung to him. The glow of her skin grew brighter, surrounding them in gentle light, wrapping the room in warmth. Jason's heart raced, but instead of fear, there was peace. He whispered against her ear, "You're not alone anymore." Her arms slid around him slowly, carefully, as though she was afraid he might vanish if she held too tightly. Jason embraced her back, feeling the heat of her body seep into his. For the first time since he had met her, Lyra wasn't holding herself apart, wasn't hiding behind silence or distance. She was giving him all of herself, trusting him with everything. Time blurred. Jason didn't know how long they stayed like that, holding each other in the glowing warmth of their bond. But when Lyra finally pulled back, her eyes had changed. They were still glowing, but softer now, calmer, like the storm had passed. Her voice was shaky but full of wonder. "It worked. Jason, it actually worked. You and I, we are bonded." Jason's breath caught. He didn't know exactly what that meant. Not in her people's terms. But the look on her face told him all he needed to know. "You don't regret it?" he asked gently. Lyra shook her head slowly, tears still clinging to her lashes. "No. For the first time in my life, I feel whole." Jason smiled faintly, brushing his thumb against her hand. "Then so do I." They sat in silence, their hands still joined, the glow between them slowly fading into the calm of the night. But something inside both of them had changed forever. Jason wasn't just her roommate anymore. He wasn't just a human sharing rent. He was her bondmate, her chosen. And as Lyra rested her head against his shoulder, whispering a soft, tired breath of relief, Jason realized the truth. This wasn't the end of their struggle. It was the beginning. But for the first time, they would face it together. Morning light slipped gently through the curtains, painting the room in soft gold. Jason stirred awake, his body heavy with exhaustion but his heart strangely light. For a moment, he almost believed it had all been a dream. Lyra's trembling voice, the glow of her skin, the warmth that had passed between them. But when he opened his eyes, reality was there beside him. Lyra lay against his shoulder, her silver skin shining faintly in the sunlight, her hair spread like silk across the pillow. Her breathing was slow now, calm, no longer the sharp gasps of pain he had heard the night before. She looked peaceful, almost fragile, as though the storm inside her had finally broken and left behind only quiet skies. Jason didn't move. He didn't want to disturb her. For so long, she had carried her loneliness like a shadow, and now, seeing her rest without fear, he felt a deep warmth fill his chest. But then the questions began to rise. What happens now? What did this bond really mean? Was she truly tied to him forever? And what would it mean for his life as a human? Jason's thoughts tangled, fear creeping in, but before it could take root, Lyra stirred. Slowly, she opened her glowing blue eyes, blinking softly as if waking from the deepest sleep. Her gaze landed on him. For a moment, Jason thought she might pull away, maybe regret what had happened. But instead, she gave him a small, fragile, "Smile, Jason," she whispered, her voice still husky from sleep. "You stayed." Jason's chest tightened. He brushed a strand of hair from her face, careful and gentle. "Of course I stayed. I told you I would." Lyra's eyes shimmered with something he had never seen in her before, complete trust. She placed her hand over his chest, right above his heart, and closed her eyes. "I can feel you, inside me, your presence, your strength. It's steady. Warm. I didn't think it was possible, but it's real." Jason froze at her words. "You mean you can actually feel me?" She nodded, her voice soft but certain. "Yes. My people, when bonded, we share more than bodies. We share pieces of our soul." I know now you are here, always, even if you are far. And I think you can feel me too. Jason thought back to the strange warmth that had surged through him, the way he had felt her loneliness and pain as if it were his own. And even now, lying there, he realized he could sense her, not just physically, but something deeper, like a quiet echo inside his chest. He whispered, almost in awe. You're right. I can. Lyra's smile widened, though tears gathered in her glowing eyes. Then it is true. You are my bondmate, my chosen. And now, I can never be alone again. Jason swallowed hard, emotions swirling inside him. He had never asked for this, never imagined it. And yet he couldn't deny the truth. He wasn't afraid. Not anymore. Instead, he felt an unexpected peace, like he had found something he didn't even know he had been missing. Still, he asked carefully, And you? Do you regret it? Lyra shook her head firmly. No. I thought I would die with this loneliness, carrying it until the end. But you gave me something I never believed was possible. Her hand pressed gently against his chest. You gave me belonging. Jason's throat tightened, his eyes burning slightly. For a long time, he had lived his life quietly, working long hours, barely scraping by, telling himself he was just ordinary. And yet, here he was, chosen by someone extraordinary, bound to her in a way no one thought possible. The silence between them was no longer heavy. It was warm, comfortable, filled with unspoken understanding. Jason leaned closer, pressing his forehead against hers. Then we'll figure this out together. Whatever it means. Whatever comes. Lyra let out a shaky laugh, soft and almost childlike. You really are impossible, Jason. A human should not have been able to bond with me. You should have been a myth. And yet, here you are. Jason smiled faintly, his hand resting over hers. Maybe that's what humans are best at, doing the impossible. Her laughter faded into a soft sigh as she nestled against him again, her body warm, her presence now a constant comfort inside him. For the first time since they had met, there were no walls, no distance, no silence between them. Jason knew their lives would change. There would be questions, dangers, maybe even rejection from both their worlds. But none of that mattered right now. What mattered was simple. They were no longer alone. And as morning sunlight bathed them in gold, Jason realized something he had never admitted before. This bond was not a mistake. It was the beginning of everything. The days that followed felt different. The apartment, once quiet and ordinary, now carried a warmth that Jason couldn't explain. It wasn't just in the air. It was inside him. Every time he looked at Lyra, every time their eyes met, he felt her presence echo within his chest, steady and constant, and he knew she felt the same. Lyra moved differently now. She no longer sat on the balcony staring at the stars with that lonely, faraway look. Instead, she hummed softly as she cooked. Her glowing eyes softer, her smile gentler. Sometimes Jason would catch her watching him as if memorizing every detail of his face, as if she couldn't believe he was real. One evening, as they shared dinner, Lyra put down her fork and spoke with quiet seriousness. Jason, I must tell you something. To my people, bonding is sacred. It is not just emotion, it is survival. Without a bondmate, many of us fall into despair. Some even lose themselves completely. She paused, her glowing eyes searching his face. I was close to that edge before you. Jason froze, his chest tightening. He had known she was lonely, but not how deeply. Lyra, he whispered, at a loss for words. She reached across the table, taking his hand in hers. But now, I am whole. And my people, if they ever learn of this, they will not believe it. Humans were always spoken of as stories, myths of a species that could not bond, that could not endure our cycles. You are impossible. Jason let out a faint laugh, shaking his head. I don't feel impossible. I'm just me. Lyra squeezed his hand, her voice soft but full of certainty. That is what makes you extraordinary. You are human. And still, you became my chosen. Her words lingered with him long after dinner ended. Jason lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, thinking about what it all meant. He had spent most of his life believing he was ordinary, just another man working long hours to survive. But now he was part of something greater than himself. He had given Lyra belonging, and in return, she had given him meaning. The next morning, Lyra stood by the window, sunlight bathing her silver skin in soft glow. Jason joined her, and for a moment they simply stood in silence, watching the city below. Finally, she spoke. Do you regret it? Jason looked at her, really looked, at the woman who had once been a stranger, who had become his roommate, his friend, and now something far more. He shook his head. No, not for a second. Lyra's lips curved into a small, trembling smile. She stepped closer, pressing her forehead gently against his, their bond sparking alive once more. Then neither do I. Jason felt her warmth, her steady heartbeat, the quiet hum of her soul inside him. He thought about her words, that humans were only a myth among her people, a species believed incapable of bonding. And yet, here he was, living proof that the impossible could be real. He smiled faintly, whispering against her ear. Maybe that's what humans do best. We turn myths into truth. Lyra let out a soft laugh, a sound filled with relief and joy. For the first time, since she had come into his life, Jason realized she was free. Free from her loneliness, her despair, her endless searching, and he was free too. They stood together in the sunlight, two beings from different worlds, bound not by rules or expectations, but by something deeper, something no one else believed could exist. Jason didn't know what the future would bring. Maybe her people would reject him. Maybe humans would never understand. Maybe the bond would test them in ways he couldn't imagine. But none of that mattered, because in that moment, with Lyra's hand in his, he knew one simple truth. They had found each other, and in a universe full of endless stars and countless species, that was the most human miracle of all.